Once again we reach for Elton John's Jewel Box. We pull it out and let's see what's inside. Looked at Deep Cuts Disc 1. This time we're looking at Deep Cuts Disc 2. And this is the one we're going to be reviewing today. Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm reviewing all of the discs on Elton John's Jewel Box. And today I'm looking at disc 2, which is a further selection of deep cuts chosen by Elton himself. Now, as with the first video, I'm going to make a few comments about the selection. I'm going to suggest another deep cut from the same album, if it's an album I haven't met before. And at the end of the video, I'm going to suggest some deep cuts you might like to listen to from albums which weren't chosen by Elton in this selection. Now, I won't be rating any of the tracks on this CD because I've already done that on the individual album reviews I've done for all of Elton's studio albums so far, and you can find those on my playlist. Elton's first selection on this disc is from Caribou, and it's the wonderful track Ticking. He calls this a cinematic song, a whole movie in a song. Which is still relevant today, and it's one of those story songs which Bernie was so strong with in his lyrical creations. Elton says he's never bored with singing that. Well, of course he isn't, because it's an absolutely magnificent track. Basically, it's just Elton and his piano, a little bit of synth coming in just towards the end there. I'd be really interested to know whether the vocal and the keyboard were recorded at the same time, or whether they're separate tracks. You might know that. Maybe you could comment below in it, because the piano accompaniment is really moving all the time. It's very dramatic in what Elton does here. It always creates a whole orchestral accompaniment just on the keyboard. So another thing I noticed from this particular recording was the length of the last note. And I reckon that last note lasts for over 30 seconds. Also an interesting thing to listen to if you've got a moment on that. But a magnificent choice. It's a great deep cut. If only we could hear this live more. Track 2 is Crystal from Too Low for Zero. Interesting one, this one from Elton, because there's no piano in this. We've got a Yamaha synth and a drum machine accompanying him singing. Elton says in the notes here that he was trying to wrong foot people with his choice and his arrangement here. Interestingly, as with a number of the tracks here, we've got the lyric sheet included in the booklet that goes with the tracks here. So you can again see the little changes that were made, perhaps by Elton, perhaps by Bernie, and the songwriting process going on there. So that's quite interesting. Now, I reckon it's one of those tracks that perhaps at the time I wasn't that impressed with, but having listened to it again, and especially at the kind of the new volume they seem to have created on this set of tracks, I think it improves with age, this one. It's not a bad tune at all, and it's an interesting part of Elton's songwriting career. Track number 3 is All Quiet on the Western Front from the Jump Up album. Elton says he was experimenting with different lyricists on this album, as we know, but there was something special about Bernie's lyrics, and I think we probably all agree on that. You know, that the two of them together was sort of the peak of Elton's creativity. He reckons this one sounds like him. It's a song about the trenches in World War I. You know, it's a likeable, fairly slow ballad. It's one that wasn't terribly successful as a single, but it's still nice we got it. It was issued before Christmas, and I think for that reason we've got sleigh bells on it. I can't think of any other reason why we've got sleigh bells there. That's interesting. There's a kind of a trumpet sound at the start, which is done on the synth, I think. I'd really like a real bugler to have done that. That would have been quite powerful, I think. I like Elton's voice on this one, you know, I think it's a decent song, this one, and it's one that deserves a re-listen. Now, track 4 is Tell Me When the Whistle Blows from Captain Fantastic. Elton describes this as the greatest album he ever recorded, and this particular track is a real funky track. He particularly likes the strings arranged by Gene Page, who did the strings on Philadelphia Freedom. So you can kind of hear the similarities between those two tracks on this one. What we get on this, certainly what impressed me, was the volume of the track. Again, the original Captain Fantastic comes across very quiet on the hi-fi. When you play this disc, it's much louder. You can hear so much more detail going on. So I really appreciate having this one on the Deep Cuts album. So yeah, useful inclusion, this one. Now, the opening of track number 5, Freaks in Love, sounds to me a little bit like a Spandau Ballet track, maybe something like True. See what you think about that idea. Anyway, Elton says this one is a tribute to Southern soul. It's from Peachtree Road and was recorded in Atlanta. It's got that sort of gospel feel. It's got a very heartfelt vocal. I like the kind of the mood that's been created here. It's perhaps not one of my favourite tracks from the album, but it's significant that Elton appreciates it as one of his favourites. For track number 6, Elton again goes to the Union album. So this is his third selection from this album, which he recorded with Leon Russell. This track is about aging and mortality. It's called Never Too Old. It's a gentle R&B ballad, perhaps not the most remarkable melody on that particular album, but again, it's another one we can enjoy listening to again, and the two voices and the two pianists work so well together, don't they? Track number 7 is The Emperor's New Clothes from Songs from the West Coast. Another one which is a real favourite amongst Elton fans of Elton's later albums. He says here that he's trying to recapture the feel of his 1970s albums, but with a difference. And he said the song was influenced by Bob Dylan, and that he liked to sing it because he liked to sort of shock audience with it. It wasn't a typical sort of Elton John song. It sounds great. The production levels on this are really good, really impressive. To me, there's an awful lot of words in this song, and that maybe just detracts from it slightly. There's a lot to take in. It's an interesting choice, and I like these selections because they're not commercial tracks. And at the time, Elton was recording the kind of songs he wanted to record, not that the record labels wanted necessarily to have. So he wasn't particularly bothered whether they were going to be hits or not. He just wanted to express himself. And I think actually they're stronger for that approach. Track number 8 is House from the Made in England album. And Elton says that this track made him think of some of John Lennon's solo work. He loves the chords and he loves the waltz time. And he says this one always goes down well. Okay, so we respect those choices. Interesting that he's picked this particular one from that album. For me, I'm not that keen on the reverb on the vocal. I'm not that keen on the synth accompaniment, nor am I that keen on the lyrics on this one. I don't think it's Bernie's strongest lyric, but still, each to their own, and it's significant that Elton has placed this one on the deep cuts. Track number 9 is Gotta Get a Meal Ticket from Captain Fantastic. Elton describes this as a time when he was broke, but he was having a happy time. So it's those early days of songwriting. He describes it as a great adventure in the 1960s. Interestingly, also, you see in the book here the original typed out lyrics from Bernie. And you can see again little changes that have been made in the songwriting process. So that's a real value of this, having this book here. It's a great rock soundscape that's been created here. Elton's giving it a rasping vocal performance here. The verse and refrain work really well together. It's just a quality track, this one, and I'm glad it's here. Now, quite a contrast between Gotta Get a Meal Ticket, recorded in the early 70s, and Understanding Women, which comes from The One. And a complete contrast in the style of track itself. Now, Elton says this one is a very electronic track, a bit like the Pet Shop Boys. He wanted Dave Gilmour to play the guitar in it and got him to play because Elton really admires his work. Now, I have to say, when I originally reviewed this one and I listened to it again on The One, I wasn't that keen on this track, but again, listening to it again and how it's presented in this selection, I really quite warmed to it, especially the big bass, which makes quite an impression on you if you're listening to this on a good hi-fi system. So I recommend listening to that. If the neighbours don't mind, just bump up that bass, bump up the volume and just listen to how that feels, and it's really quite impressive, actually. So I don't so much mind the program rhythms on this one. I normally prefer, the rawness of a real drummer, but it's an interesting period in Elton's songwriting. I wouldn't want it to be like this all the time, but we can appreciate it for what it is. The lyrics are a little bit strange on this. I'm not quite sure the metaphors work in it, but apart from that, I think it's a track that's getting better all the time. The next track is Shoot Down the Moon from Ice on Fire. Now, a lot's been said about this track, that it could have been a James Bond theme. Elton says in the notes that he was obsessed by the Bond idea, but in the end he didn't send this in as a Bond song. Now, I've read elsewhere that it was rejected as a Bond song, so obviously we have to go with what Elton's saying here. He didn't actually send it in, so fair enough. I think if it had been sent in, it should have been accepted, actually, because it's such a strong song. Elton describes it as having a big yearning chorus. What might have happened? Well, 1985, when this song came out, they were putting together A View to a Kill, which eventually became a track presented and written by Duran Duran. If it hadn't been for that one, in 1986 we had The Living Daylights, which was a song by a-ha. So either of those maybe could have been replaced by Shoot Down the Moon by Elton John. Maybe they could have tweaked the lyric just slightly to get in those words, View to a Kill, Living Daylights, whatever. It doesn't have to be the name of the song, does it necessarily? Well, an opportunity missed by the Bond film industry there, I think, because this is a haunting piano ballad. Particularly impressive bass guitar, if you can listen to that and single that out. Definitely deserves its place on the deep cuts here. A great last chorus. And for me, because I've only got the vinyl of Ice on Fire, it's great to have this finally on CD. Now, we now have the first of two tracks from Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. This one is Have Mercy on the Criminal. It's another giant big rock number and a great story song from Bernie. The intro, according to Elton, was originally written for the guitar, but then it came out on the piano and they decided to keep that in there. The guitar break in this reminds me a little bit of I've Seen That Movie Too, from Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. It's a magisterial song. It's a big production number. Great piano on this. And we could maybe compare its theme to something like Madman Across the Water. It's got that sort of feel of just being on the edge of sanity, hasn't it? The desperation of it all. Certainly very dramatic. Maybe the sort of song we might expect to find on a Pink Floyd album, possibly. I don't know a lot about them. But I think it might sort of fit on there. And of course we've got orchestral backing. Particularly thing to look out for on this one is the improvisation from Elton on the second verse, when he plays with the melody in a very dramatic and powerful way. Definitely worth listening out for. And the next track is Blues for Baby and Me, also from Don't Shoot Me. Elton describes this as like a strange half-sister of Tiny Dancer. They're both California songs that are widescreen and panoramic. And he says this is one of the songs he gets the most requests for live, along with Harmony. Well, why not? Because absolutely superb song, this one. Interestingly, in the book here, we've got the original lyric sheet. And the refrain is interesting because it's all over now, don't you worry no more, gonna go west to the sea. Now, the next line Elton sings is, the greyhound is swaying and the radio's playing. But originally that was different. Originally it said, the radio's play, the music is swaying. So somewhere that got changed. And it's in the same handwriting, presumably Bernie's handwriting. So it may be that Bernie rethought that line before giving it to Elton, or it may be that Elton had a play around with the melody of it, said, do you mind if we swap that round? And then Bernie wrote in the changes there. So these are really interesting. In fact, they'd make a book on their own, wouldn't they, actually, if they could find all of these original lyric sheets, put them in a book, a bit like Paul McCartney's Words, bit of commentary from Elton and Bernie on it, and then we could see how that song has developed. So great stuff there. One thing to look out for on this deep track, if you don't know it well, listen out for the sitar, which is used very, very effectively here. It's a slow, but it's a brilliant song, this one. I hope you enjoy it. Now, Elton's 14th choice on the CD is My Quicksand from the Diving Board. Elton's saying here that he didn't care about radio play. he was just loving playing the piano and he was making the kind of records he wanted. Well, good for you, because we get a good indication here of what Elton was thinking at the time, what sort of music he enjoyed and enjoyed singing and writing. He says the piano interlude here, which is nicely done in the middle, was a one take. First time he'd done it, just made it up. What brilliance. I wouldn't say this is his strongest ballad from this album. It's got a jazzy feel, quite an uneven meter and slightly awkward lyrics for me, but it's still an interesting one to have, and not a skip over track for me. I would definitely listen to it, but maybe there's a few others on there which I like a little more. Now, a great finish to this CD, because Elton's chosen Street Kids from Rock of the Westies. He had a different band for this album, and he says it was not necessarily better than his normal band, but it gave him a harder sound, a more sort of driving sound. And he particularly highlights the fantastic guitar riff in this song. This is a big sound. When you listen to it, it's really impressive. I enjoyed hearing this again. We've got, a very strong vocal on this. It's a little bit in the mode of sort of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. Maybe not his greatest melody in terms of the verse on this, but it's still an exciting piece to have. So thanks for including it. Now, I just want to talk about some other deep tracks I would recommend you listen to. Now, some of the albums I already commented on in the previous video, so I'll just single out the ones that Elton's chosen for this CD and other tracks we could perhaps listen to. And on Caribou, you might want to try Pinky on that, which is quite a beautiful song, a very tender lyric. Or his sort of space one, I've Seen the Saucers, which is great fun. On Jump Up album, you might like to listen to Spiteful Child, a bit of a underrated track, that one. That's definitely growing on me. Nice little piece, that one. Now, songs from the West Coast. Check out the track Birds. Now, this hardly sounds like Elton. He's very closely mic'd on this. Some people have said this is the track from his later career, which is the real standout track, because he's really doing something different here. Yeah, it's good songwriting. So see what you make of that track. Very unlike Elton in a way, but an interesting one. From Made in England, I might recommend the rocker Pain. Interesting lyric, great driving rhythm on this one. Just a fun, uplifting song. From Ice on Fire, a real deep cut, this one, Soul Glove. See what you make of that. I haven't listened to that much at all, and I'd certainly like to include it on a selection that I put together. From Don't Shoot Me, you could try, it could easily have been on this disc actually, High Flying Bird, just a magnificent track. Very similar in a way, in a mood to Blues for Baby and Me. It's quite slow paced. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it's so well done, just a classic track. And from Rock of the Westies, well, what about the song Feed Me, which appears to be addressing the idea of dependency, maybe on drugs, maybe on alcohol, I don't know. There's quite a desperate lyric in a way, but it's also a very engaging song. Interesting, the harmonies that Elton chooses on that, so that's very much a deep cut I would recommend. Now, there are some albums which aren't mentioned on either of the two CDs. So I'm just going to recommend a few other deep cuts from some of the other albums. Now, from Empty Sky, you must head over and listen to Gulliver /Hey Jude/Reprise. This is the closing track, quite bizarre. The first part is about a dog. The second part is a sort of jazzy obviously the name is a sort of tribute to Hey Jude, and then the third part, Reprise, is just a little set of clips of the previous songs. Quite unusual, but you've got to listen to it at some stage, I think. From the Elton John album, why not try First Episode at Hyenton? A beautiful love ballad, this one. It's a fragment of a memory of an early relationship. So sensitively done. It's just a classic track. From Breaking Hearts, why not go with In Neon, one of Elton's catchiest refrains. Maybe not a classic album, but there's some fine songs like Burning Buildings as well on that second side. In Neon is a lovely track. From Red Strikes Back, I've always enjoyed Heavy Traffic. Again, quite an unusual song this. Some interesting harmonies, interesting sound from Elton on this one. He's doing something different, and I think those are always worth listening to. From the Big Picture, there's this beautiful sort of soul-y R&B ballad, Recover Your Soul. Again, it's not a deep lyric, it's not a big story going on here, but it's a beautiful setting Elton's given this. It's so comfortable to listen to. Reminds me a little bit of that song, You Can Make History Young Again, one of Elton's best sort of little known tracks in a way. So try that one. From Wonderful Crazy Night, have a go with Blue Wonderful. Again, Elton's playing on this word blue like he did in Blue Eyes. Again, just a lovely, sensitive love song from his later period. From Madman Across the Water, try Indian Sunset. I'm sure I don't have to say too much about that song. That's another panoramic, cinematic story song, episodic in a way, a bit like a Paul McCartney song in a way. It's got different sort of compartments in it, but it all works together to tell this powerful story, and from Elton's golden songwriting period. From The Fox, try Elton's Song, a wonderful sort of honest love song, beautifully sung from a much underrated album, I think. And finally, from Wonderful Crazy Night, maybe try England and America. That's an interesting song, contrasting the two worlds that have meant so much to Elton, England and America, where he's been so successful and he's enjoyed the cultures of both countries. Have had such a huge influence on his songwriting. Okay, friends, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed that. Which deep cuts would you recommend to other Elton John fans? Please make some comments below if there's any that I haven't mentioned. Any of his studio albums are fine. Let's stick to the studio albums if we can for now, because there's rarities and B-sides coming up later on. But list them below and I'll do a follow-up video. So what we're here all about is sharing the joy of Elton's music. So if you can suggest a deeper cut that maybe somebody else hasn't heard or hasn't listened to for a while, all the better. We can enjoy the music more. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, we're still standing.